Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the Chris Voss Show.com, the Chris Voss Show.com. Hey, coming here with another great podcast. We, of course, appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to give it a like, subscribe to us on youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit that bell notification button so you can see all the wonderful reviews, all the great product reviews we're going to be reviewing over the next little while, because you want to know what to buy for people for Christmas. So be sure to check those out on the YouTube channel. You can see Rocky the Raccoon or Freya the Husky on there as well. And you can see the great podcast with wonderful guests like we have on today. Today, we have a most excellent guest, as always, Kenneth Ameduri. He is the runner of his website that he has on his thing called crushthestreet.com. And I think he's the CEO of it. Are you the CEO of it? Or how's that work?
No, I wear all the different hats. Crushthestreet.com, chief editor. I've done everything. I've mopped the floor at my website too.
I used to see, at my corporations, I was always the CEO and the janitor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was amazing to me, no matter how big my company was, how many hundreds of employees we had, I was still picking stuff off the floor. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm still the janitor.
Well, we started, this started off after the 2008 financial crisis. We were really concerned about the economy, and, we really started to understand what was going on behind the scenes. And, you have that whole aspect of, this government intervention that really caused the 2008 crisis. And this was the birth of Crush the Street, the network of sites that we've started. We've come a long way since the janitor days of the website. I mean, I remember, buying the domain name and trying to create the website by myself. And, now we got a whole team of writers that contribute to then help, that post, and regularly discuss relevant information about the economy. And something that's really beautiful about what the internet and even YouTube has afforded us, and iTunes and these decentralized platforms, is the opportunity to learn from, so many different sources, not just the mainstream media per se, but alternative sources. And I feel like competition of information has helped us find greater truth than we've been told in the past. And that's the reason why I really love what I do. I love educating people. I love helping people to make money. And that's my role at crushthestreet.com. That's why I wake up every day. That's why I do my research. And I mean, if people want to visit my website, they can get to know me better there. But stay tuned. I hope to give you guys some good information here during this podcast.
Awesome sauce. And the website is crushthestreet.com.
Yes, sir.
I like that title. That's a pretty awesome title. And of course, you guys cover the gambit from everything from real estate investing to the economy to investing in the stock market, pretty much everything. In fact, I'm seeing some articles on your website. They're just about kind of life and what's going on in Americana.
Absolutely. And again, we got a whole team of people that contribute and, talk about precious metals and sound economics. And, one of the things I like to tell people is, we all have opinions in life, right? And everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But, when you put your money where your mouth is, there's actually a scoreboard that clearly reflects whether or not your opinion is actually working out for you. And that's the reality of things. When you invest and have to put your money and anticipate what is going on and trends and, what's going on with stocks, what's going on with precious metals. I mean, really, you're analyzing what people are going to be doing in the future. Where are the trends going? And anticipating those things and being able to anticipate those things and correctly do it is how you make money. And this was one of the reasons why we were largely ahead of the trends with cryptocurrency in 2017. That was the greatest bull market in all of history. The cryptocurrency Bitcoin run. I mean, that was the greatest bull market that we've seen up until now, maybe it's the greatest bull market that I'll ever see in my lifetime. And we were part of it. I mean, we were advocating for Bitcoin in 2012, 2013. We ran a documentary about it. We called it Banker's Worst Fear in 2013. I know people will argue that, but we anticipated something that we thought was going to be very big, and it paid off very well for us. And that's, again, opting out of the mainstream media. The mainstream media was bashing Bitcoin at, last year, and they had to cover it, of course, but they covered it when it was 20,000, 15,000. They're scratching their heads about it, but it was nowhere to be heard of when Bitcoin was $700, $800. I mean, that was the time to be talking and looking into these things. And that's what we were doing. And that's my goal, again, with what we do with our research and our focus.
Yeah, you've got to know what's coming and what's coming down the pike and what the options are. And I remember doing interviews for Bitcoin back in the 2013, 2014 era. People were like, what is this? What is it about? And I could see it would be the future because of the freedom and the no limits that it had outside of Federal Reserves and other things of that nature. And we initially saw that, the banks were like, oh no, we got to squish this. The Fed was like, we got to squish this. We can't let this have its route. We can't lose power. But the decentralization of power that cryptocurrency gives is just immense.
Yeah. Well, and Milton Friedman, he predicted it loosely. In the 1990s, you might have seen that clip of him talking about some sort of internet money that would really be out of the hands of the government. And, the free market is like, trying to hold water in your hand. It's like impossible. When you try to, contain it in one section, it comes out the other way. And that's how I feel like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is. If you try to control capital too much, and it's especially seen in corrupt countries like Argentina, Venezuela, Cyprus, Greece, these countries that have these strict banking controls. And while the country is collapsing, right? Who wants to hold their wealth, their 30, 40 years of savings in a currency that's collapsing? I mean, nobody wants to do that, but the government doesn't want you to jump ship because that only perpetuates their problem, right?
Yeah,
but it's not just you as a sovereign individual. Mm-hmm. And it was difficult prior to Bitcoin. I mean, unless you were able to get your hands on some gold or something else that's tangible. But Bitcoin, I mean, how beautiful is it? You purchase it, you get on an airplane, turn your phone on, and there it is. I mean, you don't even have to like it. You could just get in, get out of it, and buy a house somewhere else or do something else with it. Buy US dollars if you lived in Venezuela. You don't even have to like Bitcoin. Just for the sake of moving your money out of the hands of a corrupt government, that's a use case in it all of itself. And I love it for that reason.
And a lot of governments are afraid of it. I mean, the U.S. was afraid of it. I mean, because the U.S. has to compete with it now. They sell T-bills, and most people would buy T-bills because for the safety factor, but they would buy T-bills because the belief was the U.S. government will always be around and pay their bills. So it's a good investment. But you've got countries like China that have all but, I think, pretty much banned cryptocurrency at this point, right?
Yeah, well, the countries, I mean, the US, the SEC, these countries, they're not going to want to allow this to compete with the dollar. I mean, even the countries that are collapsing, right? The country, they don't want cryptocurrency to compete with their collapsing currency, like the Bolivar, the one that went into hyperinflation. Yeah. Even though it's collapsing, they still don't want you moving your money from bolivars into something else. They're not encouraging that. They're saying, hey, we need to keep this in order. And the only way we can do that is by keeping you all in this one specific spot here. Yeah. But absolutely, any sort of competition to the mainstream is not going to be promoted. You're not going to hear about it promoted in, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, CNBC. These are not going to be things that are conventionally that are taught about in a positive way in the current college education system. The government and the progressive conventional wisdom in society is kind of in a way, not in a conspiratorial way, but just in a way, uh, a groupthink, a major groupthink, and very much going down a certain path that isn't always in the best interest of the people. And I mean, in a lot of ways, we're deteriorating as a society as we continue to move from a capitalist society into a socialist society. And it's not binary, for all the socialists out there like Bernie Sanders who say, hey, how come we don't have free healthcare for everyone? How come we don't have free college education for everyone? It's not a binary thing of yes and no, because in a lot of ways, we do subsidize people who can't afford college education. We do subsidize people who can't afford health insurance. And there's a whole spectrum of socialism that already exists. He just wants to pour fuel on the fire and, really advance it to another level. So, anyways, I just went on that rant, side rant there. But yeah, any competition to the mainstream is going to be fought against tooth and nail. They're trying to do it with YouTube. And if they really do get their hand on, people and free speech, and Google really shuts down people like us who want to just have an opinion and expose truth where it is and the lies where they exist, other avenues will pop up on the internet that allow people to have free speech. And I wholeheartedly believe that the free market will prepare and offer opportunities for that.
There's an old saying, I think it was from the movie No Country for Old Men, you can't stop what's coming. That's vanity.
Well, one of the things that I think is coming down the pipe is AI. And I think we're going to have a conversation about this in the conversation here. But AI is something that's very controversial. Even people that are conservative or libertarian minded, they're worried about AI taking people's jobs. What are people going to do? Large portions of society going to do if you have these robots replacing their jobs? And how do we legislate this away so we don't have mass unemployment or mass displacement of jobs in our society? And what I would say is, if you try to legislate AI in a way that limits technology from advancing forward, sure, you'll contain it in one area, but another country or somebody else is going to rise up, because all AI is technology moving forward. And if one company is using AI and becoming more efficient, you, as a company that's in the dark ages, will just be put out of business because you're inefficient and your profits will go down. You'll be put out just by the free market saying you're not profitable and this person is. So that's why it's a double-edged sword. You have to be open and nimble to using AI. Your kids need to be able to navigate the economy in a way where they're nimble and able to learn and, in some ways even merge with AI. It's because that's what's coming too. It's not just AI versus humans. It's the merging of AI to make humans that much better. And I believe that's coming in a lot of different ways.
I think you're right. You've got to adopt and adapt. You've got to see, we're living through quicker cycles. It used to be that you could wait, I don't know, a generation, and steel would, U.S. Steel would go from being the number one in index on the stock market to where you now have, Google and other different technology things that are more cerebral based as opposed to labor, blue collar based. You've got to have your eye on the future, what's coming. And like you say, you got to adopt and adapt, and you've got to explore certain things. I mean, like you said, and we talked about cryptocurrency, there were a lot of naysayers at the beginning of it, but I could see the freedom of it where, if anybody's ever sat down, I would encourage anybody to read books on the Federal Reserve. If you understand how the Federal Reserve works and the power it exerts, and even I was reading the other day that one of the problems they have is when I want to transfer money between banks, from my PayPal to my bank or vice versa, it takes 2 to 3 days sometimes to get that transfer doing. And the great thing about Bitcoin is I can press a button and within seconds you get the money. And I'm like, why can't we live in that world? Why do I live in this world where, I can't get my money from one bank to the next without taking 3 days? And turns out there's a company that sits atop those transfers and controls them. And the reason it takes 3 days is because they're an archaic company with this archaic control they have over banking and banking regulations to oversee these transfers. And the reason they're doing it is because they get like a chunk of change off the banks for every transaction that passes through them. So there's this arbiter that's controlling everything. And it's all about these controls and power centers, like you say, the US government, the Fed, the SEC, all these different controls that they want to have over you and your money. And the great thing about cryptocurrency is that freedom, that it's just like, you know what? I don't need any of you. I'm just going to send money to that guy over there and be done with it.
Yeah. Well, we're our own bank with cryptocurrency. We're our own transaction network. It's PayPal, Visa, and gold or the US dollar all combined. Like the best attributes of all three of those are combined into Bitcoin. And I don't think it's going to be this Beanie Baby fad that goes away. I mean, a lot of people that are so anti-Bitcoin and said, oh, it's going to go away. I mean, I know guys like Peter Schiff are really against it. I mean, it's largely finding a base here around $6,000. And the fact that it's $6,000, I think, says a lot about what Bitcoin is and, its viability in our system. And it only continues to show itself more and more resilient each year that goes by, because in the beginning, in 2011, 2012, people were worried that, is the network even safe? Can I really put in, $30,000 of purchasing power into this and feel confident that it's going to be there? And what is it going to be lost in cyberspace? And a lot of these concerns and fears have been mitigated just for the fact that it's been around for this amount of time. 10 years is showing itself that, hey, this is something that we can trust in. And Bitcoin is a beautiful thing too, that it was birthed out of the 2008 financial crisis. All of these problems that we're talking about, this was a solution to that, a response to that. And it's difficult to even replicate what Bitcoin did. It had that first mover advantage, and it doesn't have a creator, no central point of attack, even from a creation standpoint. I mean, it's just the people's money. And that's a really interesting thing, and something I really have opened my mind to over the years. And as I've made a decent amount of money from it. I've invested in it, and I think it's going to be around for the long haul. Would I equate it to gold? That's something that people are scratching their heads about now too. Is Bitcoin going to be around in 1,000 or 2,000 years? That I'm not 100% certain of. I believe gold is going to retain its purchasing power for the next 10,000 years, if we're still around and the earth hasn't blown up by then. But Bitcoin might have other competition that comes around. I mean, there's, in theory, an infinite amount of cryptocurrencies that can come out and compete with Bitcoin. Gold is a physical, finite asset. But, having said that, I feel safe saying that Bitcoin's going to be around, and you're safe to put your money into it for the next 50 or 100 years. I'm not worried about it being displaced in the very near term. I'm talking long term. I think Bitcoin started something very special that isn't going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really hard for agencies and everything to control it. I mean, they're going to be able to have some sort of oversight, but the freedom of being able to move stuff around, I think, as more and more, we had somebody on the show recently who oversees different international transfers of money through cryptocurrencies, and they make sure that they do the checks and balances that pass each different country's various laws on the legalities of those transfers, making sure that they're not coming from illegal sources that have either been banned by governments or maybe are drug dealers, sort of thing. Basically they're applying the tests of the money laundering principles that the banking business internationally is required to uphold under international laws. And so it's kind of interesting that certain countries haven't quite adopted or are kind of negative towards cryptocurrencies, but they're slowly coming around. Everyone's slowly coming around. Even now, you're seeing legalization of exchanges like the two twins, the Zucker whatever twins that claim that they had money in Facebook, and you're seeing the expansion of that. And like you say, yeah, I don't know that maybe Bitcoin won't be here in 100 years or 50 years or 20 years. There could be something better, like maybe something takes it to the next level. There's always stuff being improved constantly in this world. And so maybe there'll be something better. But for now, Bitcoin, like you say, has been around for about 10 years. It's very well known. I mean, if you ask people what cryptocurrency titles they know, it's going to be Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum. And, Bitcoin got a lot of press and a lot of news, that everyone heard about when it was being talked about. And I think it's going to be a good mainstream ones. There's all sorts of different ICOs and other things. And you can get into depth if people want to learn about that sort of stuff. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's a real future. And I think it's going to affect how markets transfer funds, how stuff's going to happen. Can you buy stock off the New York Stock Exchange now with Bitcoin yet? Or is that still going to go through exchanges and money stuff?
I'm not aware of anything that you can do with Bitcoin directly. I can imagine there might be some sort of service where you pay with Bitcoin, but there's an instant conversion into US dollars, and that gets purchased, from there into the system. Because that's even how a lot of these companies who take Bitcoin, what they're doing, they're charging you in US dollars, and there's a conversion that takes place right before the transaction actually.
So let me ask you this: what do you? We talked about this pre-show. We're about 10 years into this bull market, and of course, part of the reason we've had this long of a bull market, I'll let you correct me if you think I'm wrong. But part of the reason we had this bull market is because we hit such a low point. We had the Great Recession, which was almost a Great Depression, and we hit a low point that was so low that this is probably the longest. Is this the longest bull run we've had without a recession?
Yes, this is the longest bull run we've had without a recession. I know people have talked about some other ones, with like asterisks, depending on what they consider the correction and, what have you here. But I mean, this has gone on now for an extremely long period of time. And I actually like Donald J. Trump a lot as the president. And I felt like it was a tricky thing to do for him to take on the presidency, 8 years into this bull market, with essentially the odds against him that there is going to be a massive correction or even a crash going into this really historic bull run here. But he's owned it in so many ways, and he's instilled a lot of optimism in the economy that I, wasn't really factoring in. I mean, the tax cuts that he implemented was huge for businesses and, Americans across the board. How important is it for the future of the country for companies that are all around the world to say, I want to do business in the US? And the capital that's being attracted here is, absolutely amazing. I know the first quarter of the year, they had like $300 billion of capital that was repatriated into the country.
Yeah, the repatriation was a big deal. I mean, irregardless of politics and aside of what people think about politics, I know that, and there's good and bad with this, but I know that our corporation tax of, I think it was 34 or 36%, was making us hugely uncompetitive in the world. And like you say, there's Apple is holding, there's some a lot of different people that have been holding money in Ireland, and they've been parking their funds overseas and haven't been bringing that money into the U.S. And like you say, it did get repatriated, and it does make the U.S. more competitive by having a good tax code, because people are going to other countries that had lower percentages of tax codes and using it.
Yeah. Well, and it's this fallacy that gets thrown around that, oh, the wealthy people, when you tax people at 90%, the economy does good. Everyone likes to look at the 1950s and say, oh, this was the greatest time in US history. And we had a 91% tax rate or something crazy like that. But, we fail to look at the fact that we just decimated the entire industrialized world. And we were like the only country left on the block to thrive. So, and then you got to really look out, take a really high level view is how bad have been the policies that have been set in place that have essentially incentivized companies in other countries to grow maybe faster than they would have had we been more competitive here in the US and didn't, encourage capital to go elsewhere. And that's what it's all about. If capital is incentivized to go somewhere else, that's a job, that's a business that is now not created here in the US. I'll give you a very personal example. I started making decent money, when we started our business, and I lived in California. There was a 13% tax rate. It didn't make sense for me financially to
Mhm.
be there anymore. So I said, okay, I'm going to save my money and go to Texas. Now, the Texas economy gets where I spend it. I spend my money here and the local economy benefits from that. And, Governor Jerry Brown does it in California. So that's just a very local, personalized example. And, these anecdotal things about, having high taxes is going to be really good for the country. I really feel like people aren't connecting direct dots when they say these things, because on an individual level, when something goes up in price, you are now not incentivized to spend money there. And, we know that when a car goes on sale, people go and buy the cheaper car, right? We
Mhm.
know this happens. So, on a large scale basis, you have to assume it's happening as well. And every time it doesn't happen, that incentivizes growth somewhere else. And that's the reason why we're seeing China, and Asia really start to boom and now start to get neck and neck with the US because, we've allowed essentially that to happen. And I'm not saying, we need to keep other countries down, but we need to make smart decisions to be competitive around the world. And I think we've made a step in the right direction with the current president.
So, what do you think? What do you see is going on for the future? I'll tell you what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, um, I'm seeing where we have a job market where we don't have enough people. We have more jobs right now than we have people to fill them. That causes problems where companies have to start paying more, and it costs more for them to hire, and of course their costs go up from that aspect. And then also it becomes really competitive because you're fighting over people. I've been through these things with our companies where we can't hire people anymore, and so as a company we can't grow. And if we can't compete, being able to afford to hire people, we end up just struggling. The other thing is the real estate market is definitely hitting a peak. We're starting to see, like in places like San Francisco, people starting to leave, where it's just getting too far out of control up in there. I certainly moved from California a couple of years ago because I got tired of like you said, the taxes and the costs of living that are down there, and of course being encaged in my house all the time, because if you wanted to get on the freeway and go somewhere, it took 2 hours to get 10 minutes down the road. Uh, so there's that. But I think we're seeing a peaking of our real estate market, especially in hot real estate areas, and we're seeing this. We're seeing this tightened job market where there's not enough people for all the jobs that we have. And I think we're in line for a correction of a recession. The Fed might be creating one because the Fed has, of course, been very actively this last year increasing the Federal Reserve rate. What people don't realize is that's designed to cool the economy down, to raise borrowing rates, and they've communicated they're willing to do that as much as it takes over the next while. And we may need that to get inflation under control for this raging bull. So where do you see the next 2 years going? Do you see a recession on the horizon, or what do you see?
I do see a recession coming. But to address your first point about the lack of people to fill these jobs, I mean, I know on an individual basis that is not great for the company, right?
Yeah.
But it's a sign of how good things are, right? It's
Yeah.
the opposite is true, or the opposite was true in the 2008 financial crisis. You have companies making no money and laying people off, and now we're dealing with an opposite problem per se. But this is something that I think liberals and conservatives can come to agree on. It's a matter of getting people here and a good immigration policy. The politicized problem with this is allowing people who didn't come into the country legally to just automatically get a free pass, or not have a border, not have rules, not have a merit-based system, because having importing a lot of poor people, and then these people getting on the system that is very generous in many cases, is a problem for the long-term success of the country. I mean, if you got something good, you have to protect it, and you have to be responsible with it, right? I mean, you probably would do that with your own personal household. You give some, but then you have to sit back and go, okay, this is what I'm able to do, and this is what's good for my household long term, and the rest, this is what will be my charity, and that's it. But we've become so polarized with the politics, and we can start getting into why I think Democrats like to have
Well,
immigration.
we don't want to go too deep into politics.
We don't need to go that direction, but I think there's an incentive to having an unregulated immigration system that
Definitely. I
benefits
mean,
a certain
we
party.
definitely need to pass better laws on everything. That's a given when it comes down to it. That, or maybe pass less laws. But like, I've had friends ask me, they go, "When do you think the recession's coming?" I think it's coming in probably. I would say late 2019, maybe early 2020. I don't know if it'll be a major recession that will be effective us, but maybe a mild one. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we got a lot of good things in the sense that we're mitigating this in certain
Mhm.
ways. I mean, we might have already been in a recession if it wasn't for the certain things that got passed, and the
Yeah.
optimism that we've had in the economy up until now. So it's hard to pinpoint an exact time that this is going to take place,
Mhm.
but we're already seeing real estate slow down. Rising interest rates is already slowing down real estate across the board. I mean, we're seeing homes sit on the market now for
Yeah.
an extended period of
because it's
time.
the because the Fed keeps increasing those interest rates, it increases the cost of borrowing. So if you want to buy a house, that's going to cool the real estate market, because you can't just there's not the freedom of credit at low prices anymore. And so hopefully, the biggest problem I've always had with the Federal Reserve is they always overcorrect. I don't know if that's your feeling, but it's my feeling from owning a mortgage company for 20 years. They would always overcorrect, and they'd overcorrect the Federal Reserve rate, and then they throw us into recession, and then it would dip, and it'd get kind of ugly before they would get us
Yeah.
pulled out again.
Well, and real estate is so cyclical, and it trickles into everything. I mean, when your housing price goes up, I mean, that's the majority of what people spend their
Mhm.
budgets on. It's their housing, and we've seen real estate prices go up much faster than people's income over the last 10 years. And if you own something, if you especially if you bought like in 2010 or 2011, you own your home, at least you've captured the equity on the way up.
Yeah.
Imagine the poor millennial who's graduating and maybe 25 years old right now, and it needs to try to buy a home. I mean, they got to pay really, really high prices, and they're probably in massive amounts of debt, as opposed to, say, older generations who have locked into asset prices and have been able to ride that up. I mean, that's a big deal in terms of advantage for people who've owned assets and who didn't. And one of the biggest contributing factors for why this wealth gap is taking place is that we've injected all of this money into the system. And who owns the majority of the assets. It's the rich people, and these have gone up in value, and that's enriched them while it's just gotten more expensive on everybody else. So to a certain degree, I don't agree with the Federal Reserve playing favorites and helping one group and not the other per se. But I'm not progressive in my thinking that we need to just redistribute wealth and that's going to be the end all be all for our society, because I think ultimately Venezuela is our final destination if we really go down that rabbit hole. But I think a recession is absolutely on the way. We're starting to see, again, it's the signs of this. I can tell you in my own community here in Texas, homes are starting to sit. Realtors might feel it. Construction workers are might start to feel it. All the builders, and that starts to trickle into the auto sales and retail. And once that happens, people start to lose jobs. And, it's a cascading of events like we've seen in other recessions in the past. And that overcorrection happens just in the cycle of the economy too.
Yeah.
That's what we saw even in the 08 financial crisis. And so I definitely think a recession is on the horizon. And if it comes, it's going to be felt by a lot of people. And, we're going to see a lot of equity in our homes vanish that we thought we once had. And, I'm sure it'll trickle into the stock market too.
Yeah.
Which the stocks have been very volatile, as you've seen, since the beginning of the year. And I think that's because the investors and people on Wall Street, they're starting to get worried as to how stable this bull run is and how long it can actually go on for. So it's definitely something I'm keeping my eye out for, and we're covering largely at Crush the Street.
Cool. So they can go to your website. They can learn about the stock market. They can learn about investing, dividends. I'm seeing a lot of different stuff that's on your guys' website for that.
Absolutely. If you want to learn about finance, getting ahead, building a moat, really getting inspiration for how you can advance your own personal life. Yeah, you can reach out to us at Crush the Street. You can visit us, and we have a bunch of information and resources that we can give you for free at crushthestreet.com. My goal is to educate people. My goal is to get people thinking, be nimble, and to opt out of conventional wisdom, because I think conventional wisdom is hurting people in so many different ways. I mean, if you want to be average, go, hook, line, and sinker on conventional wisdom. If you really want to get out ahead and, live a really extraordinary life, you need to opt out of conventional wisdom.
Yeah, there's so many different changes and things happening. I mean, a lot of friends have been asking me lately. They're like, what should I do, Chris? Should I stay in the stock market? Should I move into more secure gold? Are we going to keep this bull run going? Is it going to be a recession? So going to your guys' website, they can learn a lot about where you guys think the future is going and get a lot of good advice, I guess.
Absolutely. I would recommend that people, if they want a specific link, go to crushthestreet.com/crash. This is a report that we wrote that discusses, the possibility of this recession and, kind of the different nuances that are related to the economy right now that are going on. And, the possibility that we will see stocks go higher in the interim term here. And kind of how to play that, because you can't just go all in on anything. You can't just go all cash. You can't just go all gold. You can't go all stocks. And that's why I advocate for a lot of different things. I think real estate, by the way, talking about gold and sound money and Bitcoin, I think real estate is a safe haven to a certain degree, and it's a hedge against the dollar, because property is finite. And you have more and more people being born into this world. And, downtown real estate, or real estate that's close to the urban city, is finite. And I think that is something that, despite maybe a short-term crash, over time will benefit you. And it's all about not being over leveraged and getting in over your head, because that's the people that ultimately lose, is the ones that have to sell and get creamed with initial expenses. But what I love about real estate is that if you hold on to it, cash flow, renting it out kind of covers up and washes the sins of the past. You know, if you can hold on to it long enough, you know, you kind of eventually get back to where you were, as opposed to something else which might expire worthless. So I have a strong affinity towards real estate, and you know, I own real estate across the country, and I believe I believe in cash flow and that moat.
Yeah, cash flow is definitely real important. And of course, with real estate, you don't really lose your money until you sell it. Same thing with stocks, I guess, really, when it technically comes down to it. But definitely some good advice on how to get more stuff. So the best thing people can do is take and go to your website, check it out, read the articles, and download some of your reports.
Absolutely. You could visit our website. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach us at contact us at crushthestreet.com. We'd love to interact with anybody. And if anyone wants to reach out to us, and, you know, I personally respond to my emails, be happy to communicate with anybody and, you know, give people not advice, but what I would do in different situations, right? It's never personal financial advice, but you know, I can share my own experiences with people just like I have here.
Yeah, most definitely. So everyone check it out. Go to crushthestreet.com and be sure to give us a like, subscribe to us on YouTube, hit that bell notification. Also, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play. Be sure to refer the show to your friends, neighbors, relatives, and tell them to subscribe. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right. And thanks to my audience for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.